Urban, Suburban, and Rural Communities, a podcast by Ms. Palmer. What do we mean by urban, suburban, and rural? Urban, suburban, and rural just refer to different places people live. What makes urban, suburban, and rural areas different are the population, the ways in which land is used, amount of space, and transportation. We usually think of urban as having to do with cities. Cities like Columbus, Ohio, are considered urban areas. Urban areas have certain characteristics. Urban areas have a large population. That means a lot of people live in one area. According to the U.S. Census, urban areas have more than 50,000 people in them. Land in urban areas is usually used for taller buildings. Urban areas often use their land for factories and warehouses. Since there isn't much space in urban areas, people often live in apartment buildings. Because space is limited, people in urban areas often use mass transit for transportation. Mass transit means transportation for groups of people. This includes transportation like buses and subways. We usually think of suburban as being just outside urban or city areas. In other words, suburbs are on the outskirts of urban areas. Suburban areas have certain characteristics. Suburban areas have medium populations. That means a mid-sized group of people living in one area. According to the U.S. Census, suburban areas have between 10,000 and 49,999 people in them. Since suburban areas have more space, more people live in houses. Land in suburban areas is also used for shopping centers that must be driven to. People living in the suburbs often have space for larger backyards. People in suburban areas have more space for garages. They mostly use cars for transportation. Highways and commuter trains connect the suburbs with the urban areas or cities. We usually think of rural areas as being farms. But rural just means large amounts of land with low population, far from suburban and urban areas. So, rural areas could also be in deserts or forests. Rural areas have certain characteristics. Rural areas have a very low population. That means not very many people live there. According to the U.S. Census, rural areas have between 1 and 9,999 people living in them. People living in rural areas have a lot of space. They can build houses and other buildings like barns. People in rural areas use the land more for growing or hunting. People in rural areas have to use cars for transportation because they often have to drive a long way to get from one place to another. In conclusion, urban, suburban, and rural are just terms for the different places people live. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Thanks for being a great audience.